Hello, BookTube. You know, I'm the first to admit that the OGBG, the Old Geezers Book Group, the OGBG Book Hall Wars must seem confusing to a lot of people. I'm the first to admit that. All of the participants are good friends, and yet they're mercilessly at each other's throats. All of the participants have far too many books, and yet they're getting more books. And just yesterday, the three who would be called the primary aggressors, myself, Mark Richardson of Richardson Reads, and Jason Harrigan of Jason Has Books, did a live stream together. I had a wonderful old time. 2 hours went by like 2 minutes. I will leave a link to that live stream down below so that you can sample it after the fact. And the next time we do one, be watchful. Probably on Mark's channel. Be watchful for some notifications so that you can come and join the fun. I don't exactly know where the OGBG Hall Wars are right now. I'm not really sure of that. Lord knows that from the peaceful cornfields of Iowa, Bill Rutenberg attempted to construct the Rutenberg Accords, some sort of structured peace deal. I don't know if that's in tatters or not, but one way or another, I had an appointment in Boston today at a bitterly early hour. I was the first person on the subway. I was the first person on the sidewalks. And when it was done, when it spat me out, I was, as always, I was right near the Brattle Bookshop, which is a great used bookstore in the heart of downtown Boston. They own the building. They own the lot next door, which they fill with thousands of bargain books, bargain $1, $3, and $5 bargain books. And they are weathering the storm of the pandemic that all businesses are going through. Good Lord, Massachusetts numbers are so bad. They're just so bad. But I have gone to the Brattle in all weathers and all moods and all types of conditions for over 50 years. So I went today and I got a bunch of books. And I wanted to show them to you. OGBG Hall Wars notwithstanding. I don't know if this puts me in the lead or puts me behind or condemns me as an aggressor. I have no idea. Maybe the Rutenberg Accords will hold and we're all just now hauling in a status of peace. But one way or another, the first two books I got will be familiar to a lot of you. They are military history of the very first order, popular military history of the very first kind. They're parts 2 and 3 of the Liberation Trilogy by Rick Atkinson, the cutie patootie popular historian who's now doing a trilogy on the American Revolution. This is the Day of Battle, about the battle for Sicily and for the broader theater of Italy, the biggest book of the three. And I also got The Guns at Last Light, which is the third book in the series. This is a trilogy about the maturation of an army, about the maturation of the United States Army from the first volume, Dawn of Battle, which I do not have. I do not have a hardcover with a dust jacket of the Dawn of Battle. And boy, it sure looks like I need one now, doesn't it? Anyway, what this shows is a gigantic army at the beginning of World War II, not really knowing what it was about, and slowly gathering that wisdom, slowly gaining that experience through the course of one horrific meat grinder of a battle after another. Guns at Last Light is my favorite book in the trilogy. It is basically Rick Atkinson's history of World War II, of the famous Western part of World War II, not Northern Africa, not Italy, but the war for, Festung Europa, the war to beat the Nazis. And I think the narrative drive of the trilogy reaches its peak in this book. I had it forever and ever on the shelf. I got in advance copies of two of the three, these two. I wasn't in the reviewing business for the first one, I think, but certainly for Guns at Last Light, I got the advance copy and I got the finished copy and I got the paperback, and I don't have any of them. So I found both of these and got them because Rick Atkinson is just terrific to read. He really is. He is a historian in the Samuel Eliot Morison vein who remembers that one of his primary goals, right there in the name of the profession, is to tell a story. I just love that about him, and there's so many World War II historians who don't think that is any part of their job. So I was happy to find these two. Then this next one is I have mentioned on many times when I go to the Brattle that I love to getting some sort of notice on the phone. Incoming earthquake, perhaps. Uh, I love to get murder mysteries when I'm at the Brattle Bookshop. I have a great sweet tooth for murder mysteries, and after all, no time at all, March Mystery Madness will be upon us here on BookTube. And ordinarily, I say on these haul videos that murder mysteries are one of the only things that I'm still perfectly happy to read in mass market paperback. I've largely migrated away from mass market paperbacks. They aren't durable enough for me, despite the fact that I have some that are 100 years old, and they also aren't as convenient for me to read anymore. Print size, durability, that sort of thing, especially annotatability. There's almost no room to annotate a mass market. And I annotate practically everything I read. So I've been migrating away, except for mass market science fiction, mass market murder mysteries. I would grab those in a heartbeat. And I'm always in the mood for a murder mystery when I go to the Brattle, but the mass markets that I saw today, I confess, because of Bill Rutenberg, I was looking for some of Philip Craig's Martha's Vineyard murder mysteries. He wrote a whole series of them that are quite good. Bill and his family are encountering them via the movies that were TV movies that were made out of them. I didn't even know they'd been dramatized. I read them all when they came out. I have a long-standing, abiding love affair with Martha's Vineyard, but I hadn't read one of them in forever and ever. And that's the way with BookTube. That's the thing that happens with BookTube, is that you're watching somebody's channel and they happen to mention something, and it's not something that you've seriously thought of in a long time, but all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, well, okay, I should revisit that. That's all it takes. We're all such absolute weathercocks when it comes to peer pressure, especially since in our little corner of BookTube, we're not actually exerting peer pressure. It's just somebody's enthusing about something, and suddenly you think, I'm in the mood for that. So I kind of was. But as a testament, I think, to how popular they are in this neck of the woods, there weren't any at the Brattle that I could find. But I did find a murder mystery, only it's not a mass market. It's the kind of paperback I love most in all the world. It's a UK trade paperback. I don't know what it is about these. It's the thicker, pulpier paper stock, or the lack of folderol, the lack of fuss. I love it, and have often maintained when do I have a UK trade paperback within easy reaching distance? Maybe not. Maybe I don't. Well, I've got one in my hand. I'll show you the one I have in my hand. It's The Devil's Cave by Martin Walker. And I have often maintained that what publishers ought to do is publish all books in this format. And exactly this kind of thick paper, sturdy binding trade paperback. Not so much the glitzy stuff that you get in American trade paperbacks. The UK trade paperback, whatever the secret sauce is, bring out all your books this way. And you let demand determine whether or not you're going to make a small run of a hardcover for something. You'd cut your prices in half overnight. And increase your readership, which is definitely out there, despite pandemics, despite economic recessions, despite belt tightening everywhere. Your audience is out there. All you have to do is look online and see that suddenly there is an audience for a book that's $4, and that audience just disappears completely when it's $16.95. One way or another, this is a series that I think I have read one of these. It's a Bruno Chief of Police novel. And it's a little more, it's beautiful. That's another thing I love about UK trade paperbacks. They're always beautiful. Beautifully designed. And this is the only one I saw there. If I'd seen all the other Martin Walker books, I would have grabbed them all. And this is not a cozy village murder mystery of the type that I have come to love. Instead, it seems quite grotesque. It's about Satanism. It's 2 weeks before Easter, and Satanism has reared its ugly head. A female body has been found on a boat bearing the ghastly signs of black magic ritual. The victim is unknown, and nobody is coming forward. So it'll be drastically different from the stuff that I usually read from the Brattle mystery section, but I'm all for it, especially since, I have largely, despite mail hauls and book hauls like this, I have largely migrated my reading to ebooks, which are so infinitely superior in every single way to any kind of book. But if I want a physical printed book, this is a siren call. It's just so nice. Then we have a biography. I remember loving this, just think it was fantastic. No idea why I don't have it. It's one of those biographies that you read it and you realize, okay, this is a biography to keep. Not just because it was interesting, but because of how well done it was. It's Megan Marshall's biography of Margaret Fuller, Beautiful, beautiful design. You know, I always rail on this channel about how boring biography and history cover designs are, how they're vaguely out of focus sepia tone photographs or black and white photographs where the point of the photograph is hard to tell because it was culled from some boring, musty archive and it's of interest only to the author. This is how you design a biography cover. And make it evocative. Make it interesting to the eye. There's no sense using a picture what this would have been like. I mean, Margaret Fuller wrote for Horace Greeley. She wrote for American newspapers. You could easily picture in some less confident design hands that someone would make a design for this book that would have, you know, the front of a Horace Greeley newspaper in black and white with horses at the hitching post. Margaret Fuller, come and read it. Doesn't it look interesting? But instead, we have this beautiful design. And the book is fantastic. Just fantastic. It gives Margaret Fuller really the biographical treatment that she deserves. She was an absolutely fascinating figure. Connected, I mean, you'll know her in connection with the American Transcendentalist movement, but she had a much bigger and richer life than that, as did most of the people you associate with the American Transcendentalist movement. And although I would very much like the writings of Margaret Fuller, I would very much like, for instance, a huge volume of her book criticism, her book reviews. She was enormously well-read, freakishly so, Steve level, in terms of how much she was one of the only people in the country for whom there could have been a legitimate objection to the question, have you ever read? That I always raise in jest on this channel about myself. It could easily have been legitimate to say, don't bother asking Margaret a question that starts that way. Instead, ask her what she thought of it. Something like that. I think she was one of, if not the first woman to be given working access to Harvard University's library. And she wrote an enormous amount of book reviews, just a pile of them, but lots of other great journalism as well, and had all sorts of journalistic editorial authorities, and this biography does all that justice. So I looked at it. This is from, I think, 2013. I have had this a couple of times. In this case, it's not a mystery. I probably gave it away to people. I often get questions, like, for instance, who are unknown or underpraised, underknown, unsung figures in American political or intellectual or literary history, and Margaret Fuller comes right to mind when that comes up. Then this next one is interesting in a number of different ways, a number of old-fashioned ways. This is America, and it's by Joel Cook. It's in 3 volumes. I only got 1 volume. Now, in the live stream that Jason and Mark and I did yesterday, at one point, among the millions of topics that we came up, we could have gone on for 5 hours, easily 5 hours. We did 2 hours, like we were standing on our heads. We could have done 5 hours easily. And one of the millions of subjects that came up was sets of books, whether or not we buy sets of books, or one book, or a set with one book missing, that sort of thing. Mark mentioned that he will often do that he will, if he finds a set of books, he'll buy it, even if it has 1 volume missing, and just count on the fact that he'll find that other volume. That adds a little bit of spice to the hunt. And Jason mentioned that he doesn't really do that anymore. That he wants the whole set, the whole complete set. And I saw the set of these books today, and I only got 1 out of the 3, so maybe I'm a set breaker. and that's one of the interesting things. This is Cook's America. He did a few years before he did this series in 3 volumes. He did a series of books very similar to this for England, where he basically tours the whole country and writes about it, sort of in a combination of encyclopedia and personal reflections. And it's all heavily illustrated, and that book was really popular. That book did really well. So he came out with a similar thing for America in 3 volumes. And I broke the set today because, let me show you, see if I can, I'm going to be very delicate here. It's full of illustrations. And I saw the whole set was there at the Brattle today, and there's Plymouth Rock in its shrine. I only got volume 1. Or no, this is volume 3. I got volume 3. Volume 3 deals with Boston. It deals with New England. It deals with the eastern seacoast. It works its way all the way down to Georgia, which is dear to my heart. Georgia is now dear to my heart in a way that I have a bit of news that I think is coming down the line that I'll be happy to tell you about at a later date. But I think that I'm going to be in love with Georgia soon, and this volume covers all of that. So I grabbed it, and it's got the built-in bookmark, and it's got somebody put a binding on this, which is one of the old-fashioned things about it. Somebody had a binding made. It wasn't somebody doing a makeshift job like I did, because it's got the information on the front, but it was uniform across all 3 volumes. You can just picture somebody, in Everett on a hunt that had a whole room full of books that look like this. And also, this is volume 3 out of 3, and whoever had this original set clearly cared more about their appearance than they did about the internals, because they didn't get this far. They didn't read this volume. And I know this because the pages aren't cut. And it's not like the pages stop being cut right at the end or halfway through. This is the first page, and the first page is not cut, and it just goes on from none of the pages in this book are cut. So see, there you go. There's another one there. And what that means for those of you who are young or maybe don't know is, once upon a time, some books were printed this way. In fact, all of them were. They were printed where the pages were done in an enormous tablecloth that was then folded all together to make the book. And that meant that some of the folds would be on the outside. It was just the way it was. And you didn't have these huge hydraulic presses stamp cutting the books so that the pages were nice and smooth along the edges. You didn't have anything like that. That was another machine. That was an extra machine. So you didn't have that. So instead, your book came to the bookstore uncut. And bookstores would sell. I mean, they expected that you had a pocket knife. Everybody at the time, 150 years ago, had a pocket knife. And a serious pocket knife, something that could cut something. And they assumed that you also had cutlery at home or pocket knives at home, but there were also, in the dry goods stores of the day and in bookstores, there were often page cutters that you could buy. A little thing even for your keychain that you could use to cut the pages of a new book. And that was a standard thing. If you look at book review essays or essays about book reviewing from 115 years ago, often you'll see the offhand joke about how reviewers, in fact, it's in Trollope. We saw it in The Way We Live Now. You'll often see jokes about how book reviewers, always impecunious, always looking for a little extra money, will get a review copy from the publisher or from a newspaper editor, and they get to keep that copy. A lot of times that was the only compensation that they got. They got a copy of the book. They write their review, and the enterprising book reviewer would try to write the review without cutting the pages so that they could then sell it. So they could sell the review copy and it would look pristine. That was a way you knew that a book was pristine, was that its pages weren't cut. And that's a way that you could do if you were in someone's home and they went off to check on the meal or to go upstairs and check on the kids, you could quickly look at some of the prestige books on their shelves and tell how well read they were, or at least whether or not they'd ever even tried to make an effort, because in cases like this would be the acid test supreme, because you'd go to volume 2 or volume 3 and see if the pages were cut. If they weren't, then the person never got that far. All of that is gone now. That no one does pages like this anymore. So that all of that whole context, all of those in-jokes, all of that culture, all those little accoutrements, they're all gone. And what I'm going to have to do, I have a set of knives that were actually given to me by Mark Richardson and his wife. And a couple of those are quite sharp. One of the reasons that I retired them to a cabinet under the sink is because I don't have much in the way of a sense of touch. And having a butter knife around is just fine, but having a knife that means business, a knife where if you touch it, you're going to cut your skin. I always dream big when it comes to things like that, and then I remember, once I've got them out and about, I remember, oh, well, no, that isn't going to work at all. But I have a couple of those that are perfect for this. You don't want to use scissors, or anything like that. You want to use a nice sharp knife and just very smoothly cut the pages. And I will do that. I'll do that. I will just, when I get a book like this at the Brattle, I just set it down on a platform in front of me and carefully cut all of the pages. I'm not going to cut a few of them and then forget and then start reading again and realize that I can't because the pages are connected. So I'll have to do that. That'll be one of the after buy projects here. Then this next one is another example. We saw right here. We saw the Age of Voltaire in Will and Ariel Durant's multi-volume history of civilization. And here I found one on the Renaissance. I've had this before. I've had this volume many, many times. And it is, aside from Caesar and Christ, the one on ancient Rome, this is probably my favorite one in the whole series. Or maybe the volume on Louis XIV. Oh, well, one way or another, these are terrific reading, and thanks to a couple of you, I have ebook copies of all of these. But something about the book, of having a one-volume history of the Renaissance like this, I don't think at the moment that I have John Hale's one-volume history of the Renaissance. I don't think I have anybody's. And this is kind of the one I would want. It already had a library-style plastic cover on it, so I grabbed it. It was dirt cheap. All of these things were dirt cheap. Then we have a couple. These next two are right after my own heart. These are working, jobbing literary journalists and other muckraking journalists of one kind or another, both famous in their own day, and both famous in their own way. Although renown fades. When you're writing something that's hot copy today and fish wrapping tomorrow, renown fades. Now, the first of these is John Simon, who was famous in his day as a butcher of all things creative. Put a book in front of him, put a TV show or a movie in front of him, most especially put a Broadway show in front of him, and he would just rip it to shreds. And this is Paradigms Lost. The subtitle is pretentious. It's Reflections on Literacy and Its Decline. That makes you think that this is a coherent book. Once again, we have gone over this many times. This is a thing that especially pretentious critics will try to do. They will try to make it seem like they've been writing in one great oeuvre the whole time, when actually no, they've just been doing deadline prose like I do. It's not a grand theme. Rather, it's your obsessions coming to light over and over again. It's a little bit less grandiose a way to put it. These are not reflections on literacy and its decline. These are book reviews and reviews of other things, TV shows and Broadway shows and whatnot. And not a long thing either. And there's our author when he was so young. Look at that. But I was just thinking about John Simon the other day because I have this thing, the sheet from the Goats. Selected literary essays. These are once again not literary essays. These are just deadline prose. But I was looking at the review that he did of Gore Vidal's novel, Aaron Burr. The Gore Vidal's novel about Aaron Burr, called Burr. It starts off in an essay called Literary Gangsters. Gore Vidal wrote about me, among other good things. There is nothing he cannot find to hate. Yet in his way, Mr. Simon is pure, a compulsive rogue criminal, more sadistic than the neighborhood thug. Robert Brustein is not pure. He has ambitions about his station. Mr. Simon knows that he is only an Illyrian gangster and is blessedly free of side. He simply wants to torture and kill in order to be as good an American as Mr. Charles Manson, say, or Lyndon Johnson. And Simon quotes that with glee, not only because it's great to get, the poison pen of Gore Vidal, but also because it shows Gore Vidal all of his weaknesses. Especially that jab about a good American, because Simon wasn't born in America and stubbornly retained a bit of a weird accent until his dying day. And Vidal never lets you forget something like that because he was pure America in his own mind. He was the first family or whatever. I was just reading that the other day in one John Simon collection, and then I found another one. So that's fantastic. And John Simon is a joy to read. So and I will remember a lot of the literary imbroglios that are captured in this book and now completely forgotten. And if that's true for that book, then oh my, is it true 1,000 times over for this next one? Probably the find of the day. This is Corruptions of Empire by Alexander Cockburn. I already had to renovate it just a little because it was in terrible shape when I got it, but it was dirt cheap and it's a hardcover. I had to trade paperback of this book forever. I tore that book to shreds. That one, I know what happened to it. I gave it an honorable burial. I put it in a shoebox and buried it in the backyard because it could not be used anymore by anybody, even me. And I could not find another used copy. This was before the internet. I could not find another used copy of this, no matter where I looked, and I didn't dream of a hardcover. So when I buried that old trade paperback of mine, I buried it with all of my annotations because there was nowhere for me to put them. There was nowhere for me to transfer them. So I was very happy to find and renovate this thing. Just enormous joy. And talk about our author when he was young. Good Lord, look at that. Almost unrecognizable, except for the eyes. The eyes give it away. But this is, Simon was, he was like John Simon. Alexander Cockburn was an import to this country. He was actually County Cork gutter trash, but he had an illustrious lineage, as he makes sure to remind you in the collage on the cover of this book. Way back in his lineage was the British commander who burned the White House during the War of 1812. So we want to make sure you see that here. But the main thing you see are all the icons of the 1980s. When Cochran and I were writing about the same kinds of things. It's just I was writing in a tiny nowhere burg in Iowa, and he was writing for every newspaper, every major headlining magazine and newspaper that would have him, and that ended up being all of them. He wrote for everybody. Boy, going through this book, at the back, at the end of every piece in here, this is just a collection of pieces from the 1980s, especially the Reaganite era, and at the end of every piece will be a little italics annotation telling you where it appeared and when, and that gives you a perfect example of how far and wide this guy pitched his wares. He wrote for everybody. Everybody would have him, he wrote for. And he's a delight to read. An absolute delight, like John Simon, only much more so because the things in this book, so many of the little historical details in this book were the talk of the time, of the political chattering classes, or the literary too. I mean, there are book reviews in here, and some of them are very good. But mainly you get this for the political commentary, and it would be useless. That political commentary would be useless for somebody reading it now, who is interested in big picture history, because, sorry, the southern provinces are growing numb again. I still haven't worked out that solution to being on the floor, but I will. Because these are such minutiae that unless you were actually studying the Vincennes or whatever, you wouldn't know what to make of this. You had to be there is almost the phrase that I want. I don't want to use it, but it does kind of apply. You had to be there, and I was. I wrote about a lot of these same things, a lot of these same people, and it's a joy to go back and see him just with a razor sharp wit and a razor sharp pen pouncing on everybody. And it's just wonderful. He was a prickly character. I never actually met him. But I had an old friend who had met him many times, and I said, well, is he as prickly in person as he is on the printed page? And my friend said, yeah, he is, but he hates all the right people. And you get that impression when you read this book. It was a joy to find this and to revive it. I will put a bookmark in it and have a pencil at hand to revive my annotations. Then this next one will be familiar to you. Some of you will have seen this on a couple of OGBG mail halls or book halls. I found a copy, but it's not what I want. It's not the copy that I want. It's a book that I want, very much so. This is Civilization by Kenneth Clark. Well, this is a later print, and it's a paperback. And it's because of the heavy stock, they needed heavy stock paper for all of the illustrations in here. And as a result, this won't hold up well to vigorous use. And it's not the ideal thing that I want anyway. What I want is a hardcover with a dust jacket of Kenneth Clark's Civilization, not with this cover, but with the gold statue of Charlemagne, the stereotypical cover that everybody associates with this book and with the TV series. That's what I really want. A hardcover with a dust jacket of the other cover for Kenneth Clark's Civilization. I don't have it, but that's what I really want. This, as you may have seen on Todd Obel's channel or Mark Richardson's channel, this is Kenneth Clark's personal overview of the Western civilization, and it's entwines with art, with all kinds of art, whether it's archaeology or especially architecture, but also painting, sculpture, all that sort of thing. Very, very idiosyncratic, but very good book, just a book-length meditation on the nature of those things, on the nature of how those things reflect the civilizations that gave them birth. I had, as soon as I saw it on, I think it was Mark's channel, but I'm not 100% sure. Every time I see it, I realize that I don't have a copy, because every time I have a copy of this thing, I give it away. And when one popped up at the Brattle, I just grabbed it, even though it's not exactly what I want. It was one of the Great Explainer novels that came out at around this same time. You have Civilization by Kenneth Clark. You have The Body in Question by Jonathan Miller. You have Connections by Jonathan Burke. You have Alistair Cook's America, and a couple of other things too. These things were the Great Explaining series, the Great Explaining volumes. I don't know Burke's first name. I'm blanking on his first name. Him I have met, so that's kind of disgraceful. And Connections is my favorite one of all of them. And I don't have any of these Great Explaining volumes. The one that came out at this same time and had the most sequels and the most posthumous life was David Attenborough, whose explaining volume, a sort of Omnium Gatherum explaining volume at this time, was Life on Earth. And then he went on to do a whole bunch of other books, Life of Birds and all that sort of stuff he did. And then he had a mega hit with Planet Earth. So he had the longest sequalia here. But I don't have a hardcover with a dust jacket copy of Connections. I don't have my hardcover copy of The Body in Question. I hold that on this channel. Gave it away to somebody, a med student, I believe. And I don't have a hardcover with a dust jacket of this volume with Charlemagne on the cover. Seen it many times, but I didn't see it today. But I did see this, so I had to grab it. And then the last book we have here is pure geekery on my part. This is not a dinosaur book, but it's close enough. In fact, it's even more entertaining because it's less well known. This is Donald Prothero. He's fantastic. I have a couple of his books. This is after the dinosaurs. The Eocene, the Pliocene, all the eras after the dinosaurs, but leading right up to the Holocene. And now the Anthropocene is not in here, but leading up to the present day. This is all of the other animals, all the other famous prehistoric animals. Not just the marquee ones like mastodons and saber-toothed tigers and whatnot, but also, there's a megatherium of some kind or other, and calycotheres and all this. I mean, calycotheres were as big as buildings. Most people don't ever know that they existed. They have no idea that such a thing. If I showed most average educated Americans a picture of a calycothere with a size scale so that you know how big it is, if I just showed most Americans that picture, they would think it was a science fiction creature. They would think it was something out of a science fiction movie. No disrespect to them intended. It's just that there's no room to teach it. They haven't been taught that creatures like this once existed in their millions on this planet. And this book is full of those creatures, full of them, of monument tall flightless birds that could disembowel a man with one look, or beavers the size of Volkswagens, or spiders the size of beach balls. This was still an era of giganticism on Earth. It was still a slight tweaking in the atmospheric content that allowed for animals to become super huge, but most of them aren't known. So reading a book they're known to me, but I loved this book. No idea why I didn't keep the volume that I had a million years ago. When did this come out? 2006. I had a copy of this. I have no idea why I didn't keep it. But so when I saw it, I grabbed it at the Brattle today. And it really does read like the best science fiction. So I'm happy to have it. And it's full of illustrations. Full of illustrations. And Meg, look at that. I swear that was accidental. I opened it to Meg right away. What do they say? Jaws of the gigantic great white shark, Megalodon, with a modern great white shark in the middle for scale. So that was my Brattle trip today. The only Brattle trip of the week, as far as I know. We have After the Dinosaurs. So happy to have this back. Then we have Kenneth Clark's Civilization in what I admit is a placeholder volume. Then we have Corruptions of Empire by Alexander Cockburn. Fantastic stuff. Just fantastic. And he footnoted all of these things. So it isn't just him reprinting stuff. He also gives you some second thoughts on them. Then Paradigms Lost by John Simon. The Renaissance by Will Durant. America by Noel Cook, so not Alistair Cook, but another guy named Cook who came and looked at America. Meghan Marshall's biography of Margaret Fuller. Oh, I'm still not getting the ergonomics right here. Because I put the books on the wrong side, so I have to reach across myself to. Well, then we've got The Devil's Cave by Martin Walker, one of the Bruno Chief of Police novels, and finally Rick Atkinson, The Guns That Last Light and Day of Battle, books 2 and 3 of his. Oh goodness gracious! Books 2 and 3 of his Liberation trilogy, which means that all I'm missing now is Volume 1, An Army at Dawn, in hardcover with a dust jacket. So there you go. That was my Brattle trip today. It was bitterly cold. It was incredibly early. And I don't think it's going to be duplicated, no matter what my brethren in the OGBG do this week. I don't think I'm going back to the Brattle until next week. We shall see. If I do, you'll be the first to know. Thank you, BookTube.